So an AT6 comes in. Now this is a type of plane. It's a two-seater. It doesn't have a wing. So normal procedure would be for Dad to call the depots all around the country. They would ship the wing to him and he'd put it on the plane. No wing. So he went to his supervisor and said, "Do you have the blueprints?" And the supervisor said, "Sure, what are you going to do with them?" And Dad said, "I'll build it." He's 19 years old. The wing is 17 and a half feet long. And the supervisor said, "Well, how are you going to know how to do that?" And Dad said, "A blueprint is a blueprint. If I can build a wing on a model airplane, I can build the real thing."
Welcome to The Change Effect, the podcast that helps you turn life transitions into powerful new beginnings. One story, one shift, one breakthrough at a time. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, leadership coach, and change strategist who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders break through barriers to create success on their own terms. I now work with women to step into change to create a life they love. Whether you're putting yourself at the center of your own story, redefining success, or making a power pivot in your life, career, or business, you're in the right place. Each week, we dive into conversations with trailblazers, changemakers, and everyday women experiencing the ripple effects that come from overcoming the fear and doing it anyway, providing actionable steps, practical strategies, and a whole lot of fun along the way. So if you're ready to step up and become unstoppable, buckle up and let's get started. Some of the most important conversations in our lives are the ones we do not know we need to have until time begins to narrow. My guest today, Yvonne Caputo, has spent much of her life where stories, listening, and human complexity meet. She is a psychotherapist, corporate trainer, and consultant who spent 18 years as a public school teacher and more than 15 years as VP of HR at a retirement community. Across each chapter, Yvonne has helped people communicate, understand one another, and navigate the moments that ask for more honesty, patience, and care. In fact, throughout her career, she's been building the foundation for the deeply personal body of work that was yet to come. Yvonne is the author of Flying with Dad and Dying with Dad, two books that grew out of conversations she began having with her father later in his life. For many years, theirs was not the close father-daughter relationship she had hoped for. But one evening when he began sharing stories from his time during World War II, Yvonne leaned in. She listened, asked questions, and became curious about his experiences, the memories he never shared, and the parts of his life she had never fully known. What unfolded became a path toward greater connection and trust, leading to the difficult but meaningful conversations that allowed her to understand him more deeply and honor his wishes at the end of his life. This conversation is about the complexity of parent relationships, the courage it takes to meet someone with curiosity instead of expectation, and the unexpected ways we grow through greater understanding. Yvonne, it is wonderful to have you here with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So Yvonne, I think the best way for us to get started is maybe give us a little bit of background to talk a little bit about the career that you've had, since there's some twists and turns to it that I think are really relevant to the latter part of your story.
Okay. Well, you did such a beautiful job with the introduction. So I graduated from college in 1969, and there were two careers before that were open to me as a female. One was being a teacher and one was being a nurse. And the idea of nursing just did not last with me, and so teaching became this wonderful thing that just blossomed. It helped me to blossom. I was shy. I would say that I was an introvert, but standing in front of a group of children made me come out of myself. And it was the beginning for me of the idea of the story. Because when I really captured my students was when I told a story. It was the lesson within the story that you could just watch their eyes light up. It wasn't the worksheet. It wasn't the textbook. It was the story. So fast forward to my taking children to England on exchange visits. And when we were there, the first trip, the students and I were housed in a youth hostel, and the knock on the door at midnight, the knock on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning, the tears rolling down because of homesick or whatever, finding out from one of my students that her parents were raging alcoholics. So all this kind of stuff that I had no idea about, that led me to a second master's degree in clinical psych. And then, at the ripe old age of 40, I met the man who is still my husband. Wednesday will be our 37th anniversary.
Ah, congratulations.
And I moved from the western part of Pennsylvania to the eastern part. And I couldn't find a teaching position. So, with having the master's degree in clinical psych and having some therapy background under my belt, I ended up at Penn Foundation, which is a community mental health system, in their employee assistance department. And there, the first question out of my new boss's mouth was, "Are you able to do training?" Well, of course, after 18 years in the classroom, yeah, let me at it. So I did a lot of studying, and I would go out to different businesses and do an assessment and say, what do you need? The top subject all the time was communication. We don't communicate well. So using that, I developed a series of leadership trainings, all based on communication. And then I did a leadership training series with a retirement community. And the CEO liked so much what I'd done that maybe 4 months after us stopping, he called me and said, "What would you think about joining us as human resource director?"
Wow.
And I said, "Let me think about it." And what really drew me to that occupation was this was a chance for me to put my money where my mouth was. Could I work internally to really make human resources what I thought it was supposed to be? And that was that I was to represent the front line employees. The most important people in our community were those folks: housekeeping, dining services, laundry, certified nursing assistants. So I spent the next 18 years doing just that. Wow. And so now, your audience, I am what I call deliciously semi-retired.
I love that. I love that.
And the semi is that just prior to my retirement was when I started having conversations with my father. And being in retirement allowed me to take 11 years of taking my notes and doing research and having 3 drafts of a book to finally bring it to publication.
Okay, so your relationship with your father throughout the years, the relationship that you had, was it distant until later in his life, or was it always sort of running parallel? You just had never felt that you had gotten to know him very well?
It was distant. It was distant. Dad was greatest generation. There was food on the table. He slept down the hall. I knew that he loved me in a kind of esoteric way.
Yeah.
But talk to me about the things that were important? No.
Yeah.
And had good relationships with his sons because they went hunting and fishing. And the other piece of this is I'm not a sports fan.
Okay. Yeah.
So we didn't have
connect.
Much that. Yeah, we didn't connect. But in 2008, I was 62. We were on the phone. He lived on the other side of the state. We would talk about dialysis. We would talk about his medications. We would talk about his doctor's appointments. We would talk about the man across the road who was Dad's caretaker. And then we didn't have much to talk about. But on this one dark January night, he told me this quirky, funny, off-the-wall story of all things about making an emergency landing in a B-24 with their third engine out, which is where the hydraulics are. So the landing gear, okay. And it was funny. It was absolutely funny. So I said to Dad, let me get a pencil and paper. My father's exact response: "What the hell do you want to do that for?"
Now, wait, let me ask you this before you go on. So
Okay.
He is telling you this is World War II. What was his position? What exactly did he do in World War II?
Great question. He was a navigator. All right, so he was the one in a B-24 that sat in the nose of the plane, a little table with pins in it, with all his charts and stuff, guiding this plane with 9 other men aboard to and from wherever it was they were going.
Such a like odd, quirky job, but it's like everybody has different parts to play in, and I'm assuming in air flight.
Yes.
And what drew him to that? Was he very mathematically inclined? Was he...
One of his stories, and this is one of my favorites, when he graduated from high school, it was knee-deep in the Depression. And jobs were going to men with families, certainly not with this 19-year-old or 18-year-old. And he lived with 2 of his sisters, one who was going to get married. So they would be down to one very small salary to keep the 2 of them going. Dad tucked his chin in and went to the welfare office and learned about Roosevelt's program for training, the youth administration. And he said to me that there was a whole list of things he could learn. So he ran his finger down the list. Boom, airplane repair. He had built model airplanes from the age of 10. So he said to me, now I could work on the real thing. So fast forward to him graduating from that. He was in Georgia at a depot, and his job was to repair the airplanes that young pilots, in his words, busted up. They were learning to fly, and sometimes they didn't do such a good job. So, an AT-6 comes in. Now, this is a type of plane. It's a 2-seater. It doesn't have a wing. So normal procedure would be for Dad to call the depots all around the country. They would ship the wing to him, and he'd put it on the plane. No wing. So he went to his supervisor and said, "Do you have the blueprints?" And the supervisor said, "Sure, what are you going to do with them?" And Dad said, "I'll build it." He's 19 years old. The wing is 17 and a half feet long. And the supervisor said, "Well, how are you going to know how to do that?" And Dad said, "A blueprint is a blueprint. If I can build a wing on a model airplane, I can build the real thing."
Oh my gosh. Your dad sounds like first of all, he sounds very interesting, but he also sounds like a bit of a character.
Oh, is he ever? Is he ever? So the wing is built. It's attached to the plane. The pilot who's going to take it up for a test run comes to Dad and says, "Is it going to fly?" Dad said, "Yeah." "You're sure it's going to fly?" Dad said, "Yeah." "Well, son, get in, because if it goes down, you're going down with it."
Oh my God.
So I can visualize, because I know the plane so well now from writing the book, I can visualize Dad sitting behind the pilot, and they're flying around up there. And he said to me, "Hun, I didn't want to fix them anymore. I wanted to fly them." So he petitioned to get out of his deferment. Noelle, he could have stayed safe in the United States for the entire war because he did something that was so important. He petitioned to get out of the deferment and ended up as a navigator flying planes out of England toward the end of World War II.
And did he do that through the end of the war?
He did. Now, luckily for me, by the time that Dad arrived in England, he was 23 years old. And the records, which would give us an exact date, haven't been gotten to by the researcher that I work with. And Dad arrived maybe February or March of 1945.
Oh,
yeah,
wow. So toward the end.
He got 5 missions under his belt. And I say thank goodness, because I was born 18 months later.
Oh, now is the family back in Pennsylvania?
Mom and new baby are back in Pennsylvania. And one of the reasons he chose navigation was because when he got out of pre-flight, she was pregnant. And if he had spent the time to become a pilot, it would have taken much longer for his pay raise to go up to a rate that Dad really wanted it to be. But as a navigator, he would graduate sooner.
So did he have any aspirations after he got out of the war to do that? Did he stay in that profession?
He stayed in the reserves in the Air Force until 1969. However, when I was going through all the documents after he passed away, I came across this maybe 5x3 book. And in it were all of the lessons that Dad took to become a pilot.
Wow. That must have been pretty amazing to look through.
Oh, I mean, I get goosebumps even now thinking about, here I'm looking at this pilot's log, never seen it. He did not continue to fly. And that, I assume, is because it was so expensive. And he had 2 mouths and then 4 mouths to feed.
So what did he go into? Was he in the reserves and then had another job?
He sold men's clothing.
Ah, okay.
And then he sold jewelry. And his final occupation was as for lack of a better term, a seller of life insurance and of insurance through Prudential. Since you said he was a character, he could have sold the Brooklyn Bridge to somebody in Kansas.
Okay, so him being this character and you growing up with him, and he has this vast history, this really interesting history in the war, and just as his occupation there. How did you? So he never really told stories about it. He was not a storyteller.
No. I mean, I knew that he was in the war. I knew he flew something that was called a big plane. But that's really all I knew. And I knew he went away for 2 weeks in the summertime, as a part of the reserves. But no, it was only on this night that he told that story. And then on the next phone call, I said, Dad, if you're willing, start at the beginning.
And that's when it started to unfold.
All of it.
So what was the time frame that you spent with him between then and when he passed? Was that several years that you started this dialogue with him?
A year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yes, that was that was some borrowed time there, right?
It was absolute. I've never heard it said like that, but you're absolutely right. Every Sunday, for sure, sometimes during the week, we would be on the phone, and I would say, and what happened next, and what happened next, and the stories would come out, and some of them were unbelievable, and so I had to do research. And when I was doing research, the story is this. Dad did basic training at Miami Beach, and he was billeted in a hotel. Miami Beach was empty of tourists, so the U.S. Army Air Corps took it over as the place where they started to train cadets. Dad's in doing calisthenics on the beach, but he has raging diarrhea. Undiagnosed at this point, and he goes over to what's called a slit trench, which is a big hole dug in the sand, drops his drawers, falls in. Mm-hmm. Yes, falls in,
No.
Thank God the men picked him up and threw him in the ocean, cleaned him up a little bit, and off he goes to the base hospital. He was treated with arsenic.
Whoa, how did he get that?
There was no penicillin. 1943 is when penicillin was discovered. In Britain, of all things, the British scientists came here because they didn't have the ability to mass produce it. Everything they were doing was going towards the war. But we did. So by 1945, it was mass produced. But they treated my father with arsenic. Just little bits, Dad said. Now, I didn't believe him. So I would do research. And this happened from time to time going through Dad's story. So in January of the following year, my husband and I went back to visit Dad. He was in the hospital again. He was a brittle diabetic. And the hospital was where he liked to end up over Christmas because nobody was around. The family was all over the United States.
Yeah.
And you can imagine people would dote on him. They just loved him because he was such a character. My husband left Dad's hospital room to go get the car ready for us to drive 6.5 hours back across the state. And I presented Dad with his Christmas present, which was the first draft of the completed book.
How great is that? Did he know that you were writing a book?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was in on it.
Oh, he was definitely in on it. When I finished the first 4 chapters, I sent it to him. We did a lot of this by email. And he said to me, he said, well, I knew you were going to write it in your own voice. You weren't going to write it in mine. But it's missing something. I said, Dad, what's it missing? It doesn't matter. Dad, what's it missing? Honey, it doesn't matter. Dad. What he said was, combat was terrifying. My dad didn't use emotionally loaded words. And so that helped me to restructure the entire book to make sure that at any given moment the reader is going to know that combat was terrifying.
Yeah. Well, and didn't you mention too that sort of whispered to some other thoughts that you might have had a hunch about that became a little bit more confirmed around his behavior throughout his life, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe talk a little bit about that.
It didn't dawn on me at that moment, but later on in our talking back and forth, it was very clear to me that my father suffered from PTSD. He came home to 3 years of the same nightmare. Never knowing when he went to sleep, whether he was going to be able to sleep through the night or whether it was going to creep back in. And Noelle, the nightmare was so bad that he dug channels in the mattress because the nightmare was the plane was going down and he couldn't get out.
Wow. But when he was describing these things to you, did you feel like there was some cathartic quality to it where he was getting some of this out for the first time? I can imagine if he wasn't talking about it much for that many years.
The change effect. Okay, the change effect for me is to go backwards. Teacher, psychotherapist, trainer. Okay, so I knew when stuff like this came up, I knew what to do. And since sarcasm was such a refined art in our family, I said to Dad, well, you know your nightmares were normal. And my father said, what the hell do you mean? And from a neurobiological perspective, I was able to explain it.
Yeah.
And simplistically, anyone who experiences trauma as deeply as my father experienced it, they're bound to have some kind of pushback. Nightmares is one, flashback is another, uncontrolled emotions is another. I can say that I finally understood my dad's anger. He would flash in a moment over something. This is a story in Flying with Dad. Me making 3 attempts, walking away, coming back, walking away, to ask him for 35 cents to go to the dance. Because I knew I was going to hear. So when I told him about nightmares and where they came from and what part of the brain was involved, I was able to say to him, "Sorry, pal, your nightmares were normal." I could hear my father's shoulders drop 60 years after the fact. So I said, "Tell me what it was like, Dad, when you came home." He said, "Well, I'd walk around the city. Guys would come in for clothes at the store. They talked about normal things. We talked about normal things. So he said, I always wondered what was wrong with me." And my response to that was, "Dad, they experienced similar things to you, but you didn't talk about it."
Well, that's the thing that I think too, just when you think generationally, right? I mean, nowadays we know that is the kind of thing that we know so much more about. And think of how many lives could have been seriously altered for the positive by being able to talk through some of that. And think of how many people were in that war. I mean, that war is, among other wars, but of that war in particular, where you have a whole generation of people just not even talking. Did you find, as you were getting to know your dad, like did the conversations shift in energy the more that you became sort of conspirators in the book together?
Yeah, I know specifically, going back to Miami Beach, exactly when the trust level began to shift. So I said, "What hotel were you billeted in?" And he said, "I don't remember the name, but it was on Collins Avenue and some intersection." And he did tell me the intersection, but I don't remember what it was. So you can Google anything, can't you? So I came up with pictures, and I would send a picture to Dad of a hotel that was on that intersection. Nah, that's not it. Nah, that's not it. 4th time, yes, that's it. We were air cadets. Good work. Love you, Dad.
That's such a that's just such a validating thing for both of you, right? That you took the time to look that up and find it. Mm-hmm. Now, so you said this was about a year's time that you spent with him, getting to know his story, getting to understand him more closely. When did it come in where you talk about the time that you needed to speak with him about his final days and what the expectations were on his end to make sure that you were following his wishes?
That happened actually before I retired. I was on the ethics committee, and we had a case where someone on our nursing wing, end of life, deep dementia, could not communicate and had all these sores on her feet. And the doctor wanted to try with baths and antibiotics to see if he couldn't get them cleared up. The daughter, who was the legal healthcare agent, power of attorney, said, "No, that's not going to improve Mom's quality of life. Just let it go." And she had an advance directive that said that very thing. The problem was, it was from another state. So, state of Pennsylvania does not, or did not at the time, I don't really know, recognize quality of life as a reason to stop treatment. So it went to court. And the court decided that there would be a surrogate named that would say yes and sign off yes foot baths and antibiotics can happen. If they don't work, then the daughter can step in and say, stop everything, just let mom go. Well, I went to heck in a handbasket. I didn't know if Dad had anything. So I called him. I said, do you know what an advance directive is? And he said, nah. So I explained it to him, and then I said, if I find an attorney in Meadville, my hometown, will you go with me? I'll go with you, and we'll get it done. And he said, sure. Off we go. We get the document done. He names me his healthcare agent, and I can relax a little. Fast forward back to the retirement community about 4 years later, and one of the administrators comes back from a conference, and she holds up this blue pamphlet called 5 Wishes, and she said, you guys need to see this. This is such good stuff. So I asked her if I could borrow it. Now, it laid under the piles that were higher and deeper on my desk until one Friday night I said, I can't do this. I've got to clean off my desk so that housekeeping can take care of it, because they wouldn't touch it. So I come to the 5 Wishes, I open it up, and for the next hour I just read. It named a healthcare agent. It named what medical treatment somebody wanted or didn't want. Then it went on, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your children to know? Do you want a burial or do you want cremation? What kind of a funeral do you want? I mean, just all of these really intimate questions. And here again, I said, I've got to do this with Dad. So he was in the hospital, and I drove across the state, and the blue document is right there by my side, and I sweated it. Because I thought, what's he going to be like? Is he going to fly off the handle? Walked into his hospital room. He was really glad to see me. It felt right. The atmosphere felt okay. So I said, Dad, I've got another document. I'd like to go over it with you. Is that okay? He lifted his feet, put them over the side of the bed, patted the seat next to him. I sat in what was his warmth, and item by item, we went through the entire document. The state of Pennsylvania recognizes it as legal. I went and got 2 people who were in the hospital who could watch him sign it, and I knew all I needed to know.
That's such a wonderful thing to be able to do. And we're going to put that information, by the way, in the show notes, because that sounds like an amazing document that is really helpful in that kind of to just guide that kind of a difficult conversation. So how much longer after that time frame did you have with him? Did you have with him? Was it several months? I know that you had described.
It was 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
That's amazing. 6 years. But the original document that I still have, of course, hung in a manila envelope on the side of the refrigerator, so that should he ever need medical care, it would be there. The December that I gave him the book, I need to back up a little bit. The social worker came to me and she said, when can we send your dad home? And I said, you can send him home when he's ready. He had the people across the street that took beautiful care of him, okay? I knew the house was clean and ready because that's what we did, when we weren't visiting him. So we are on the road, back in my hometown. The phone rings, and it's my father. And he is screaming at me. I'm holding the phone out here, like a foot from my head because I can hear him. Why did you tell them I could go home? And then he went on and on and on and on. And I just let it happen. I didn't interrupt. I waited for him to kind of calm down. And then I said, Dad, I told them you could go home when you were ready, and it doesn't sound like you're ready. And then he said to me, Yvonne, can you come home? I'm scared. I said, I will be home tomorrow. I'll leave early in the morning, but in the meantime, I will find someone to come and stay with you overnight so that you're not alone. So I started pulling names out of a hat, of people I could call, and it was actually an old boyfriend's mother that I had stayed close to. And her granddaughter was a CNA. And she went and spent the night with Dad, went to the pharmacy the following morning to get Dad pain medications, didn't have anything. And I got back to the house, and 2.5 hours later, he was gone.
Just in time, right? I mean,
just in time.
Yeah.
Now, we heard that the people from across the street came over to visit, and we heard a thump, and we went back, and Dad was face down on the floor. And not being a medical professional, I called emergency. The EMT came. He said it didn't look good. The EMTs did not recognize the 5 wishes. They said they were too old, which I no longer think is true. So I called the hospital and said there's a do not resuscitate order on his chart. And thank goodness, the emergency room doctor called and said, you can stop working on him. I laid down beside him, put my arm over his chest, told him that I loved him, told him that he was going to be with Mom, which I knew he dearly wished, and then did the glue in our family, and that was the Lord's Prayer.
Oh.
And he was gone.
Yeah.
However, Dad's wish was feet first out of his own home. So the EMTs put him on a gurney. They take him down and they take his body out and set the body down behind the ambulance. The back doors are open and the light is shining on Dad's face. There was this soft, sweet smile. And I went, yes! The EMTs looked at me like I hadn't any marbles. And I said, Dad's wish was feet first out of his own home, and that's what you've done.
What a sense of closure, too, it feels like. I mean, the fact that you were able to, that is a gift that you got, that you were able to spend the amount of time that you were able to spend with him, but also just when you talk about his disposition and that things could get prickly sometimes, and sometimes he could be not maybe as predictable, right? You'd have to kind of do that dance a little bit with him. But the fact that you were able to extract from him this really valuable story, but also get to know him in such a deeper level. I mean, that's like, not everybody gets that, right? And to have a book. So you wrote the book. So the first book was Flying with Dad. Was that the first one that you? Okay.
That's the first one.
Okay. Yep. And then the second one is Dying with Dad. So that's more of the story of his last year or so that you were with him, or just?
It goes way, way back. Readers who had read Flying with Dad would say, how did you do it? Where did the courage come from? Wasn't it hard? And none of that was true. It wasn't hard at all because I was following Dad's wishes. We had become that close. There was no way, and you know where, that I was not going to do what he asked me to do. So Dying with Dad is a series of stories in how I became really comfortable talking about death and dying. And I love my parents because we were never shy about death. If we had animals, we had funerals when they died. If it was someone that my parents knew, and we also knew, who had passed, they would take us to the funeral home. We sat through funerals. My mother had a near-death experience after she had me. It was just, I'm so grateful to them that they didn't hold back from that. And so I was prepared, and that's really what I want readers of Dying with Dad to feel more capable of being prepared.
Yes.
To have these discussions. And after I wrote the book, a young woman in her 40s said, Yvonne, my parents would bring it up and I would never go there. And she said, and now I will. Now I get why this is so important. The second person was 85, and he said, I didn't know anything about this advanced directive business. So he sat down and he did it. And then a couple years later, for his birthday, he said to his daughters, here's my birthday wish. We're going to Zoom call. I'm going to go over the 5 wishes. That's my birthday. So they did. And when it came time to burial or cremation, he said cremation. And one of them said, well, what do you want us to do with the ashes? And he said, well, toss them over the bridge. At that point, who in the heck cares?
But very specific, right? I mean, that's specific direction that
yeah.
I think we tend to shy away from those conversations. It's not a conversation people think is going to be a fun one to have on either side of it, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're the child or the parent or whatever relationship it is, that's a difficult conversation to initiate. But I think what the 5 wishes sounds like it gives you is that framework that takes some of that emotion a little bit out of it. I mean, it's certainly a personal set of questions, but I think that's it's a brilliant vehicle to do that.
It made it so easy.
Yes.
Here's an item. What do you feel about that, Dad? All right, that's great. You don't do anything. Here's another item, and the item was, do you want your body given up for research? My father said, cross that out. Who in the hell would want this body? It's old and decrepit and all that kind of stuff. So that was something that we crossed out. That was a no. When it came to the funeral, he said, you know that part where people stand up and they say lots of nice things about you at the funeral? I don't want it. If they haven't said it to my face, then they damn well better not say it at the funeral. That's an item. Going back to the ashes person, throw them over the bridge, the daughter said, wouldn't you like us to spread them on the farm where you grew up? And he said, oh, that's too much work. And then they said, well, what if we'd like to do that? He said, you'd really like to do that? And they said, yes. So he changed his 5 wishes.
There is not a lot out there, and that just feels like such a wonderful tool to be able to use. Now, what would you say to someone who is trying to get to know their parent, who is kind of in a similar situation where the parent is getting older? What would be a word from the wise of like maybe how you approached it to make it maybe a little bit easier to think of the first step to take?
Listen for stories. If a childhood memory comes up, tell me about that. I'd like to know more about that. Sit back and listen. Do not interrupt. If there seems to be a slow spot and there's a question you'd like to ask, then do it. Who, what, where, when, not why. Because why makes people feel defensive. That's how I would suggest to do it. And my mother was brilliant because she said to me 30 years earlier, Yvonne, your dad's not going to go to you. You're going to have to go to your dad. Well, it took me until 30 years later to do it. And that's to be curious and open just to listening.
Well, and it feels like that probably came at the exact right moment, right? When you were equipped to do that. And, you know, if you think about it, if you had done that earlier, maybe that wasn't the time. Maybe that wasn't the right time. And knowing where he was in his life, that he was ready to open up, and you were actually there and open enough to listen at that point. Like, you just don't know. You don't know how that kind of thing unfolds. But what a precious gift to get and to be able to put in 2 books. What's up next for you? Are you writing another?
I'm thinking about it. Right now, when I said I'm deliciously semi-retired, in retirement, I have the privilege of taking a nap if that's what I feel like doing.
True.
In retirement, I can go to bed later and come up, wake up later. I want to be able to do what was sort of kind of promised to me that retirement would be all about. But I'm really passionate about people reading my books. I've gotten such wonderful feedback from people who have read them about how meaningful it was. I've gotten such wonderful feedback from people who are my age and even younger that the 1950s and the 1960s really resonated with them growing up. The feedback I've got from Dying with Dad, I want you, Noelle, to experience the profound, sacred joy that I felt when I looked at my father's body. And it completely changed my grief journey. Do I miss him? Yeah. Has my voice caught when we're doing this? Because I really miss him, especially when I talk about him. Would I like to cook one more pot roast dinner for him? Do I have a ton of unanswered World War II questions and other kinds of things? Yes. Can you find me teary-eyed? Absolutely. But equal to that, he's been gone now 11 years. I still experience the joy of looking at my dad's face, because what it said to me is thank you. I trusted you with helping me on this last journey, and you did it. I want you to experience that joy. I want others to experience that joy. As a counselor, I know what it's like to go through grief. I lost my brother in 1978. He was 26. I know what that's like. I can't say that I feel joy around Mark's death. I learned a lot. I grew a lot. But I didn't experience that kind of joy. Sound mental health is the ability to contain the paradox. Patricia Sun. You can and you can't, you will and you won't, it is and it isn't. So here I'm sitting, deep sorrow, deep joy, all in the same container.
Wow, that's something to get your head around, the paradox of it all, because it's true. It's this and that, right? Not this or that. Yvonne, this has been such a wonderful discussion, and I love your books. I love the 5 Wishes, something that I'm going to be putting into practice as well with my family. And I just thank you for being so open. I know that your work is so incredibly eye-opening for people and will help people for years to come. But I can't wait to hear what the next book might be.
Thank you for going to that, because the other thing I want your audience to know is it's never too late.
Yes.
Did I think I'd publish a book at 72? I don't think so. This is a metaphor, but it ain't over till the fat lady sings. And so I feel very strongly that my entire life has been a series of events that have led me to being able to write 2 books on something as deeply personal as flying with Dad and dying with Dad. And before I forget, 5 Wishes cost $5. It's legal in 46 states, and it's legal around the world. 5wishes.org.
Yeah, it's that is an important piece that we need to put in the show notes, because I think that's going to be really helpful for people, especially those who want to start that conversation and are having a difficult entry point, right? And I'm also going to be putting all of Yvonne's links in the show notes so you can get the books, you can see what she's up to. Because Yvonne, you do not strike me as someone who sits still very often, even though I know you want to step into retirement. But the semi, I know, gives you the opportunity to do other things too.
Uh-huh. Yes, it does.
Yvonne, it was such a pleasure meeting you and so wonderful to hear your story. Your father sounds like a hoot. I wish that I had met him.
To inspire me.
Oh, I love it. That's a beautiful photo of your parents for those of you that can't see. What a great, he looks like a funny man.
Well, there are some jokes in the book that he told me as we were working on it that will never go to print. And he figured...
That's perfect.
He figured I was old enough at 62, right?
That you wouldn't, yeah. You didn't have to avert your eyes. You could actually read them. Oh, Yvonne, thank you. It was such a pleasure.
It was such a pleasure here. And thank you for your questions. Thank you for the emotional resonance that I get from you, because the type of audience that you have when you're a speaker means the world. And you made it just fun and easy.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Yvonne. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's it for now. Until next time. Thank you for listening to The Change Effect. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed this episode, so more women like you can find us and take their next step toward creating a life they love.